Hello everyone. What I'd like to do is give you a quick walkthrough of the QuerySurge application. So what you're looking at is the login screen. QuerySurge is a Web 2.0 application, which means you have typical drag and drop functionality, and it behaves very similar to a classic desktop application once you're in the interface. When you first log in, what you'll see is our dashboard. The dashboard will show a bunch of widgets that display information that's critical to your data testing purposes. You can create multiple pages in this dashboard and add additional widgets and move widgets around if needed. Here you'll see we have a list of a few widgets that can be dropped into any of the different pages that are available. Just to give you insight on how some of these widgets work, so if I open up the Scenario Outcome Reliability widget, you can maximize this to get a deeper look. What this particular widget is showing is how many verifications are done when a particular suite is executed. You can see it usually has a consistent value, and if you see any type of dips or drops, it's kind of an indication that something went wrong. In this particular scenario, you can see 132 validations were successful and about 33 verifications failed, which is why you have a success rate of roughly 80%. You can configure these widgets to focus on specific scenarios that you're interested in, and each one of these dashboards are unique to the individual user who's logged into the system. Moving away from the dashboard, the next thing we're going to talk about is the design library. The design library is the main area within the application where you would build your tests. So our concept of a test is what's referred to as a query pair, and you'll see that these can be organized in your typical folder structure that you can organize the tests in any which way works for you. If you drill into one of these folders, you'll see there'll be a list of query pairs here, and you'll notice an icon that indicates the status of the last time that specific query pair was executed and what that result was. Let's take a deeper dive into one of the query pairs that failed. So when you look at the query pair, you'll see that there's two sides. There's a source and a target, and then there's a corresponding query that's going to be executed against the source and target sides. You'll also see a connection dropdown. The connection dropdown specifies specifically which data store you're trying to connect to. If I expand this dropdown, you'll see the list varies with a lot of the different connections that are available, whether it be a flat file, whether it be a traditional database, whether it be a web service, whether it be a Hive instance. There's a lot of different types of connections that are available for your query pair to connect to. And you'll see a corresponding drop-down that on the target side as well. So if you want to see what the results look like after a query pair is executed, we can go to the Design Time Run tab. And you'll see in this particular test, we had roughly 6,500 rows retrieved from our source query, the exact same number of rows retrieved from our target query, which is why we had a 0 row count difference, but we had 7 records that had some type of data failure, which is why the overall status of the test has failed. Notice we also have some performance metrics below, which tells you how long it took for both query to execute, as well as how long it took for the analysis to run, and you'll see overall it took only 3 seconds for this particular test execution. If you want to get a deeper dive into what the results look like, you can click this View Query Results button. And what you'll see is a couple different tabs available. There's a source tab, which has the data that came from the source system. There's a target tab, which will show the data that was retrieved from the target system. And then there's a failures tab, and the failures will show you the differences between the source and the target. When looking at the failures tab, I like to view it on this side-by-side view, which will have the source data on the left and then the target data on the right. Notice we see 7 records because these were the 7 records where we had some type of data mismatch out of the 6,500. And if you scroll over, you'll see it keeps the data in sync. You'll see that it's this credit card number field where there was a difference. So something happened between the source and target where the data does not match. So this would be something we would want to bring to the attention of perhaps the ETL developers who are writing the jobs that are causing this data to move from the source to the target. QuerySurge gives you the capability to export this data either as a CSV, XML, or Excel record. Now, although you can build your queries directly in the query pair section, we know that about 60 to 70% of all query pairs are what we call pass-through mappings, meaning there's no data being transformed between your source and target systems. For those types of tests, the QuerySurge Query Wizard does a great job of allowing you to create tests quickly and adding them to your folder structure. So to do a demonstration of the Query Wizard, we click on the drop-down menu, and you can select Launch Query Wizard. And the first thing it's going to ask you is to connect to a source and target system. So I'm going to choose my source being an Oracle sales database, and my target system is going to be an Oracle data warehouse. You'll see it'll do a quick check to make sure that you can connect to those systems, and it gives you some basic metadata information. Now there's three types of comparisons that the Query Wizard can do. It can do a row count comparison, which is great for a quick sanity check. It does table level comparisons, which is great for data migration projects, or it can do column level comparison, which you can specify specific columns that you want to validate within the tables in your source and target. That's the most robust item in the Query Wizard, so we're going to choose that one. Next, you'll be asked to choose your schemas from both your source and target systems, so we'll go ahead and choose them. And then next, what you'll see is it'll provide a list of all the tables in the source and all the tables in the target. You can apply filtering to specify specific tables that you're looking for. So in the scenario I'm going to illustrate, the orders table on the source side corresponds to a purchase table on the target side. So in order to create the relationship in the test, all you do is drag a line between the source and the target tables. And a couple things will happen. One, you'll see it'll create the query pair in the query pair mapping section all the way onto the left. It'll show the columns that exist within those two tables in your source and target, and it starts to build the query for both your source and target queries that will be added to the query pair. The next step would be to create the columns that you wanted to create the test for. So you would draw a relationship between any of the columns between your source and target systems. So I'm just going to select a few different ones here. And you'll see as you drag these lines and this relationship, it's going to modify the queries accordingly. In addition, you can also apply some filters. So if, let's say, you wanted to filter some of the data from the source side, you can go ahead and do that by filling out the values in the drop-down menus. And one of the nice things about this filtering is I don't need to know any of the specifics of the data technology I'm connecting to. It will automatically use the proper syntax for that specific data type. And I have the ability, if I want, to create other tests as well, simply again by dragging new relationships between the different tables and then going ahead and creating those tests. And then once those are created, I can go ahead and create a new folder that will contain all these different query pairs that the wizard has generated, or I can put them in an existing folder, and I can also make them part of a suite so that they can execute together. Once all your query pairs have been set up, the next thing you'll want to do is execute them. They can be executed from our scheduling section. So if you go to our scheduling module, what you'll see is a list of different test suites that have been created already. A suite is a collection of tests to be run together. You'll see this particular suite has 3 query pairs. If I want to add additional ones, I can just go to the design library on the right-hand side, and you can drag folders, and it will pretty much take all the queries that are part of that folder and add it into them as well. You can then choose to remove specific tests from the suite if needed. Now, if you're ready to run a suite, I'm just going to close this because I don't need to save those changes. You can execute a suite one of 3 ways. You can right-click on it and hit Run Now, which will execute the suite automatically. If you want to schedule the suite to run at a later point, you can click the Schedule Scenario button. And what this will do is you could say, I want to run all these tests on the weekend, and you would select the date that you want to do the execution and the time, and then you would go ahead and add the suites that you wanted to execute for this particular grouping. And then the third way you could choose to execute your test is you could kick it off from an external product. So I'm going to show an example. I'm going to go into Jenkins, and what we have set up in Jenkins is an automated build project, and what this project is going to do is it's going to simulate an ETL job, and once the ETL job is finished, it's going to execute QuerySurge. So I'm going to go ahead and hit build now, and what you should see in a moment is the build gets created in the build history, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the console output. And what you're seeing is this is the simulation of the ETL job that is being executed, and once that job reaches 100%, it is now going to request to execute the tests in QuerySurge. So you'll see the QuerySurge test is initiated, and it will go look to execute that specific test. So if I go into the QuerySurge run dashboard, what you're going to see is a new test that has just been a new test suite that has just been set up for execution. You can see that while the suite is executing, graphs will monitor the current status. Even before the test is finished, you can drill in to any one of these sections and take a look at the specific results, and you'll see the same tabs that we saw from our design time run, which is you can see the source, the target, as well as any data failures that occurred. I can go back to our Jenkins instance, and it'll show us that indeed there was a failure. You see 4 out of the 5 tests that we executed did fail, and therefore you can use that result to perhaps roll back the job or do some type of reconciliation on the data that did fail. If we go over to our inbox, you'll see we also had an automatic email triggered, and the automatic email will show the information as far as how the status of those tests and what type of state that they're in, and also give you detailed results as far as row counts and failures as the like. You can drill into these emails, and it will take you to another QuerySurge tab in the browser. It'll ask you to log in, and it'll take you right to the results that we were looking at before on whatever link that you click on. These results information can also be shown in our reporting section. So if I go to our reporting module, you'll see we have a bunch of reports that are already pre-set up and configured. If I want to show you a detailed report of the scenario we just ran, we can go ahead and select that recent scenario and hit Run Report, and it will give you the information very similar to what you saw in the email as far as the overall test case pass rate. It shows you how many verifications were done, how many data failures occur, and the actual data reliability, which is the percentage of data that was accurate, as well as the information and the drill downs of the specific data in question. So this provides you with a high-level overview of how the QuerySurge product works. There are many additional features and different subsets of items, but this is the general overview just to give you a basic walkthrough of the overall flow.